G'day, folks. Welcome to another reading of Stuff and Such. We're going to be reading The Guns in the Saddle by Peter Field. Just a couple housekeeping messages here before we get into it. If you could go ahead and comment on the chapters as they come out, that really helps drive our interaction. Doesn't need to be anything elaborate, just hi or how's it going. That is super helpful, thank you. One more thing. If you'd care to join the Stuff and Such family, it's a couple dollars on our membership fee. It's what that does is it allows members to have instant access to all of our audiobooks. Sometimes I get carried away and start reading into the midnight, read 6 chapters in one night. However, if you don't feel like joining, that's perfectly fine, no pressure at all. The videos go public around 9 o'clock each morning Eastern Standard Time, and we will be welcoming you there. Enough for the chin wagon. Let's get into the story. Chapter 1. Your Honor, we've reached a verdict, intoned the leathery-faced foreman after waiting for the last of his fellows clumping out of the jury's room to file into the box and be seated in the midst of a tense silence. All right, Laugh, the judge nodded with a heavy formality. What was the finding of the jury? Guilty as charged, the harsh words rang out. For a stunned moment the silence held, marking the climax of a bitterly fought case in the hot and stuffy Los Lunas courtroom, packed this afternoon with sweaty, hard-breathing men. Then, with the suddenness of a thunderclap, one of the two bleak-faced defendants sprang to his feet in a livid rage. This is your work, Marble. Don't think we ain't squaring it with you, and damn soon. Ace Belson by name, the man revealed the ferocity of an animal at bay. Ignoring the bench, jury, and rumbling spectators alike, he stabbed a bluntly accusing forefinger squarely at the slim young range detective, whose shrewd investigation had been responsible for the conviction. Silence! The stony-eyed judge, his voice raising with difficulty over the hubbub of the courtroom, banged his gavel down vigorously. Marshal, I instruct you to place those men under restraint. Things have come to a fine pass, he roared as the lawman hastily subdued his 2 prisoners. When a convicted cattle thief dares to raise up in court and curse his betters, I intend to sentence these men immediately, and furthermore, I'll undertake personally to see that sentence is carried out. There was not a man present but understood his meaning. For long months, this western New Mexican range had been ravaged by cattle rustlers so bold as to dare any brazen coup. It had been brought out in this trial that Belson and Toller, the convicted pair, were reputed members of the notorious Seven Rivers Gang, and with the prestige of Billy the Kid, their leader, behind them, they obviously believed themselves in a position not only to defy, but to threaten as well. Angered beyond control by such cold-blooded effrontery, Judge Dill had called their bluff. Sitting quietly in a corner, between Ezra and Sam Salone, Pat Stevens ignored the scowling prisoners while the droning judicial voice sentenced them to 5 years each at hard labor. In order to scrutinize speculation, the level-eyed, straight-backed young fellow whose work had brought this highly condemnable result about. A matter of weeks ago, an unknown cowpoke, but now suddenly possessed of illustrious reputation, Clay Marble would have stood out in any crowd. Perhaps less for his looks than for forthright firmness and self-possession of manner. Black-headed, of average height, with prominence but a clean, line jaw, Marble was probably in his mid-20s. His blue eyes could turn so cold as to seem gray, and there was a crispness in the set of his small head which bespoke an unusual alert intelligence. He appeared to be utterly without nerves. Good blood in that boy, Pat reflected approvingly. Hasn't been given a chance to get rolled up neither. He'll do to comb the brush with. He nodded to himself. Well, reckon that settles that, rumbled Ezra with finality, straightened in his chair as his single eye trailed the convicted men being dragged unceremoniously out of the courtroom. The lanky old rawhide had attended every detail of the trial with an uncommon interest, as indeed was true of all the three. A number of steers from the Anvil, a ranch in eastern Arizona which Stevens had only recently purchased, had been involved in the theft under investigation, the friends having given, in fact, Clay Marble considerable assistance in wrapping up the case. "You thank that boy for his work yet, Stevens?" muttered Sam Sloane as the crowd in the courthouse began to break up and drift outside. "I sure am." "Marble!" Pat raised his voice to catch the young fellow's attention before he turned away. "Can I see you for a minute?" Clay turned towards Stevens with no break in his impassive calm, took Pat's outstretched hand. "Well, it's over, and a good job too, Marble," Pat said. "I don't need to remind you it's next to impossible to convict a rustler even on the best of evidence. You handled your case just about perfect. I'm glad to have known you, and I don't hesitate to say the range needs plenty more of your kind." Flushing to the eyes under the approval of this stalwart man before him, Clay Marble was not fooled for a second. "Shucks, Stevens," he grumbled protestfully with a disarming grin. "I did what I had to do. In my boots, you'd have done as well, and probably better, and you know it." "Reckon you'll go on with this kind of work now?" Sam guessed. Marble nodded, engaging the stocky, stubble-jawed little man thoughtfully. "I kind of got roped into it," he answered mildly. "Working for 3 big stockmen over in the central part of the territory, it keeps me chasing stolen stock in just about every direction there is." "Well, it ain't a bad idea to be pulling out of Los Lunas pronto," Ezra thrust in. "This town stay mighty worked up for a day or two, and rustlers and ranchers seem so evenly divided there in the court, it's hard to tell which is which." Not missing the veiled threat, Marble sobered swiftly. "Well, I'll see Belson and Toller safely into jail. Reckon the judge won't send 'em to the territorial prison in Santa Fe. If he knew Billy the Kid as well as I do," he added slowly, "maybe he would." "Well, Bonnie might get that Seven Rivers crowd steamed up and try and spring the pair of them," Pat nodded. "But that's hardly your headache, Marble. Your job's done." They talked over the case a few minutes longer before Clay turned away, red-headed and lanky, not given to loose talk. Ezra gazed after his departing figure with a single sharp eye. "What a life he's got ahead of him. Good leather in that boy," he sighed out. "Sure, and not all worn down and punctured old bullhide like yours is," snorted Sam. "Nor a lard greased and nutmeg grater like your sourpuss neither," roared Ezra huffily, starting a fire. "Okay, you two, settle it later," Pat interrupted. "Nothing more to hold us here. I want a drink before we get on our way." Knots of men were arguing on the corners as the trio passed down the short main street of Los Lunas. Few showed any inclination to surrender the right-of-way, and attention lingered here with the result of the trial having been done nothing to the ease. Plainer than print, it said that nothing had been settled of this range by the conviction of a couple petty thieves. The three friends exchanged knowing glances. "Afternoon shadders are getting kind of long," muttered Sloane tightly. "Might not be healthy to linger in this town after dark, especially after being witnesses on this trial." While the prospect worried none of them, Pat sensibly nodded agreement. "You're right. No need of getting involved any deeper. We'll have our drink and then drift out." They stepped into the Elkhorn and found space at the bar and were pausing over their glasses to look the place over when a gnarled seasoned cattleman halted behind them to tap Pat on the shoulder. The latter straightened and turned. Younger in years than either of his companions, in the very prime of his life, he stood a good 6 inches taller than the newcomer as well.
"The name's Stevens, isn't it?"
the man asked abruptly. Putting him down as the manager or foreman of some prosperous ranch, Pat nodded.
"Pat Stevens of Powder Valley?"
the other insisted. That's right. I'm afraid you got the advantage of me.
"Could I get 5 minutes of your time, Stevens?"
came the curt response.
"It's a matter of business."
For answer, Pat turned from the bar and led the other man to a vacant table where, for a considerably longer interval than the period named, Ezra and Sam watched the pair confer with notable gravity. Whatever they found to be discussing, it claimed their whole attention.
"Wonder who he is?"
Ezra grunted at length, a touch of jealousy in his tone. Neither knew the answer. Their attention was presently distracted by the ugly stares directed at them by a group of men down the bar who might have been friends of the convicted rustlers. Cocky little warrior though he was, Sam began promptly to grow hotter under the collar. In another minute he would have voiced noisy objections had not Pat returned just then, speaking brusquely. "Come on, you two." He jerked his head. Salome balked, however.
"Hold on, Pat. Them ornery birds down there."
"I saw 'em. Skip it. I'm telling you." Pat's tone had serious notes to it. "We're getting out of here." Reluctantly, the pair, partners of the Barrios horse ranch in southern Colorado, but in all other things the satellites of this stern-eyed younger man, followed Stevens grumbling from the busy Elkhorn saloon.
"Hell, Pat!"
Sam sputtered as they sought their racked ponies without further delay.
"It ain't just like you to walk around a bunch of crooked young punks, no matter what kind of warning you've been handed."
Pat waved significantly in the direction of the lowering sun, which was painting the western sky with streaks and bars of color. "Let me remind you how late it's getting," he grinned. "This ain't our range, Sam, and we've had our drink. It was you pointed out the foolishness of tangling with these wolves unless our own stock is at stake. I still think that makes a bit of sense."
"Well, then dang it, what are we arguing for? Let's get going."
Sam blustered, covering his retreat. Prudence before the onset of the trial had dictated their pitching camp on a brushy creek a quarter-mile from town, where they could be by themselves. They reached it just before dusk, shifting their pack-horse to fresh gaze and prepared a leisurely supper. The case just closed came in for a lengthy discussion around the fire that evening. Pat's anvil stock, already recovered, had long since departed for the home range in responsible hands. On the morrow, their work finished here, the trio would head north towards Powder Valley. They turned in early. A wan moon rose half an hour later on an already silent camp. That dreamy peace endured on into the dark hours, to be shattered shortly after midnight by a sharp metallic clang from the coffee pot which one of them had left on the blackened embers of the fire. Pat awoke in time to catch the flat, echoless crack of a carbine rifle sounding from somewhere out in the moon-whitened shadows. Sam and Ezra were equally alert, and they abruptly, violently from their blankets, guns in hands, and tumbled hastily into the nearby ditch only an instant after Stevens. Further gunfire ripped dirt from the bank too late to do any damage. "Comes from that ridge up yonder," Ezra muttered, peering curiously. Pat grunted. "Who wants our hide this bad? None of the Seven Rivers crowd was in town by the time we left." Ezra didn't bother to speculate. "Stay right here a while." He started creeping away along the ditch, grim purpose in his very stealth. "Dang it all, if only I'd slept in my boots." A moment later, even the fire of his grumbling died out. Within 20 minutes, gunfire broke out suddenly along the ridge. Pale muzzles burst winking among the shadowy rocks. It was only a brief crackle, succeeded by the thud of hooves suddenly deadening. Sam fired once at the fleeting figure of a horseman. The distance was too great to tell his luck, but the running horse didn't stop. After a delay, Ezra plodded in, still grumbling. "I flushed 'em out anyhow. There's only a pair of 'em." No further disturbance marred the night, but they took no chances, getting what rest they could and watching by turns. At early dawn they crawled out, more than a little disgusted. If they'd hoped to get away without incident, that hope was dying now. "The Los Lunas Marshal ought to be notified about this," Pat said as they gulped their scalding coffee. "Will you saddle up and take care of it, Sam? Ez and I will look around up there on the ridge." Saloon complied without comment, jogging away towards town as they started to climb the ridge. Horse sign could be seen up there, and they found where the midnight marksman had crouched in the brush, but there was nothing further of any importance, and they were clambering back down towards camp when a sharp rattle of hoofs signaled the hasty return of Sam Salone. They ran forward, and Sam hauled in the lathered pony with a jerk and sat staring at him with not a little excitement by the gravity of the information he was carrying.
You know who that was fogging lead at us?" he burst out. "It was Belson and Toller. A bunch of toughs broke in the jail last night and hauled 'em out. They're gone, the pair of 'em, after all the hard work to convict 'em."
It was Pat who grasped the significant kernel of this staggering news in a twinkling. "Then a posse must have taken after them right away. Did Clay Marble go with it?"
"Hell no!"
Sloane was explosive.
"Marble took the trail for Lincoln before dark last night, alone."
Pat's face hardened. There could be little doubt that the outlaws were in possession of that knowledge, and he wasted no more words. "Well, we'll have to ride after Marble. We might get there in time." His tone said that he didn't think so, that with the lead they had, the vengeful rustlers might have already overtaken their solitary victim. Hastily gathering their effects, they broke camp and struck out. No precious minutes were lost in seeking the trail of the killers. A tangent over the brushy swells set them on the Lincoln Trail before the sun was an hour high. Later, Ezra pointed out with a bony finger the torn hoof marks in the trail of a pair of horses, driven this way only recently and at a killing pace. These they followed for some time. Certainly it was the trail of the escaped outlaws in pursuit of Marble. From the sign, none of the Los Lunas posse had got this close to the quarry as yet, and Sam Salone was all for fogging ahead in dead heat, and but for Ezra, the keenest-sighted tracker of the three, despite his handicap, they could have missed out altogether. He it was who insisted now on dogging the trail closely. He who, shortly before noon, instantly spotted where the outlaws had suddenly swung off the trail. It took time to work out their course. Toward a pine-clumped rocky ridge off to the right, on the weathered crest, the tracks thinned out and disappeared. The three doggedly quartered a space covering several acres, trying to pick up the trail once more, and, before many minutes had passed, Sloane vented a gruff whoop of discovery. The others hurried to where he sat, overlooking a rock-choked gully. A man lay down there. A man who was motionless, sprawled in a shapeless huddle. The horses tossing restless heads, and there was a buzzing of flies. Silently Ezra dismounted, and clambered down to turn the body over. A sightless face stared up at them. Recognition fetched an involuntary grunt out of Sam. It was Ace Belson, the newly escaped rustler whose brief freedom had ended abruptly here in the lonely hills. A bloody patch on his chest revealed the cause of death. There was no other evidence whatever had taken place. It must have happened right around daylight. Belson and Toller seemed to be overhauling Marble, and Clay saw him first. They closed in and Belson got it. God knows what happened to Toller. Probably turned tail and ran. It strikes me that our concern over Clay Marble's safety is largely misplaced. We needn't have hurried after all.
Yeah, sure.
Sloane was sensitive now.
Marble must have been tipped off about what might be coming.
He bent a shrewd scrutiny on Stevens.
By the way, that hombre who buzzed you so hard there in the Elkhorn last night, he didn't slip you a hot warning about something like this, did he?
No, that was something else altogether. Pat's attention caught then, surprise visiting his lean face. Hold on. Didn't either of you guys recognize that gent? Ezra's snort was his only reply, and Pat's bronzed features assumed a curious grimness as he went on. Why, that was Bill Block, the Plum Bob Ramrod. I spotted a dozen Plum Bob horses there in Los Lunas during the trial, and I thought you two caught on. He was naming the largest ranch in New Mexico, a cattle empire famed all over the West for its power and wealth. Probably no other single enterprise of the same magnitude west of the Mississippi was under the undisputed control of one man. Sam grunted. His tone was suspicious.
What did Block want with you?
He was speaking for old Doc Marble. Said the big boss wanted me to hire for a special job, explained Pat. I turned it down, though. Sloane didn't let it go at that.
What kind of job?
He demanded. Why, Marble wanted to get me straightening out his sons. Seemed to think he's heading for the wild bunch. Pat thoughtfully scratched his head, tilted his flat-brimmed Stetson forward, and then cuffed it back. It was no job for me, but according to Block, the old man is real worried.
Doc Marble's son, you say?
Sam was frankly incredulous.
Well, that must be Clay. Funny I never hooked their names up before. Why, Pat, Clay Marble ain't done wrong by a long chalk. What in the tarnation is this? Don't the old fool know the boy's straight as a string and smart as a steel trap to boot?
I thought you'd get it, Pat noted soberly. It was a bit of a queer deal. From all we've seen, Clay Marble needed a guardian about as much as I need another leg. It hardly seems possible that old Doc don't know that much as we do. His tone was speculative now. Didn't take me long to turn down any such phony proposition, but I'll admit I'm just as curious as you are. Something's rotten in Denmark. He gathered his reins up. We'll stop off in Castle Gate a couple of days on our way north and have us a little look around. End of chapter 1.